once you build an audience, you have some attention, you've built some trust. There's a number of different businesses that could be created outside of just like this media landscape or the media type of business.
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast, your weekly therapy session for the chaotic world of project management, transforming daily frustrations into real action. Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, joined today by my guest, Jake Jaworski. So, Jake, it's great to have you on. Why don't you give the audience a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into your latest life's work.
Yeah, I got it. I think I'm best known for starting Garage Gym Experiment and then ultimately Home Gym Con. Before that, I got my start out of college just in a traditional call center customer service / sales role. Worked that for a little bit, did some management in that area, and then moved into marketing analytics. And then I spent a number of years in marketing analytics. During that time, I started Garage Gym Experiment as a side hustle. And about 4 or 5 years into that, I was able to make it my full-time job. So I'm all Home Gym Con, Garage Gym Experiment now, but I do have a background in, in working within tech companies with customer service marketing in that area.
And you brought up the reason I wanted you to come on is because everybody goes to conferences and these trade shows and stuff, but you never actually talk to the people who started them. And, you started Home Gym Con. So why don't you start off the audience with what is it and how did you come up with the idea to start it?
Yeah. So you might go to a conference and you may have no idea who like that guy or that woman might be walking around the show and you have no idea it's them. So that's me in some cases. So the basis of the start was kind of based on the foundation of what I already had with Garage Gym Experiment. So it was kind of like 6 years into working within the home gym community. There's a number of ways I can take this question, but basically just kind of like had it in the back of my mind for a number of years and just did it. Just seemed like something that was missing from the market. And it was just something I did. There's not much more to it other than it was missing. I think people would enjoy it. And it's something that a lot of industries have. And there's so many different hidden benefits of something like that help take the industry to the next level. And then just a little bit of background on Home Gym Con, like I mentioned, just did it. Put the first event together in 6 to 8 months and had it was a small first year, but everybody that went, I think, got a lot of value. There were about 29 vendors, couple hundred people in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, French Lick, no easy airport access. So just the fact that we got people out there was really cool. And then word spread organically and, it has doubled or tripled in size each year since.
So when you say you just did it, I mean, how did people don't just come up with an idea and then just execute on building a trade show? How did you go about getting from your idea to vendors bringing in, we'll say, thousands of pounds of equipment and showcasing it for something that was unknown, that's never been done before?
Yeah. So a lot of it really, like I said, it was based off of what I had done in the past. I had a lot of really good connections within the home gym space. I had been doing a podcast within the home gym space. So I've done a lot of interviews with like company founders, other people within the space. And honestly, the hardest part of this entire thing is just like getting it up and running, surviving the first couple of years. So a lot of credit goes to the people that came out the first few years. But, I would say the biggest thing was a couple of years prior, I had started the podcast like this. And as you know, you don't typically just call up somebody and talk to them for an hour and a half about your career and what you're doing and what's going on within your company. So you form really good connections with those people. And with that being said, I think like out of the first 12 companies that signed up that really helped get the ball rolling, I had interviewed in a podcast. So once we got like 10 people, it was easier to get another 5 and then another 5 and then another 5. So that's honestly what had really gotten it to something at least. Like at least we knew there's going to be some people. I also had an Instagram account that I'd been building for many years that had probably close to 200,000 subscribe followers at the time. So kind of built-in marketing right there to help spread the word to just to make sure people even knew it was happening.
And logistics, though, I mean, how did you decide on French Lick?
So French Lick. So I was familiar with the resort and the convention center. I actually had a buddy who worked there and was like, you should do this. This was like 3 or 4 years prior. He was like, you should do an event like a trade show for the home gym industry because he was actually working in that space at the time at French Lick. So I knew that existed, just did some initial research, and I didn't have much money. I didn't have like much money to play with. So there was definitely no just going to a convention, like a bigger city convention center right away. So French Lick just seemed like a good option. I mean, pretty simple as that. And then they kind of directed me towards we call it a decorator. And they handle all of the uh, they handle all of um the booth setups, the shipping and logistics. And luckily we found a really good guy, a small business, that first year that we've been able to work with really closely and grow with them. So it all just kind of like came together. You just got to do it, and then you just got to figure it out as you go.
And then you moved the first 2 years it was in Indiana in French Lick, and then you
Correct.
moved and then you moved.
Correct. So the the second year we had actually filled up the space relatively quickly. So the primary area was sold out relatively quickly, and it was just like we have to find somewhere larger. And I'm in the Midwest. I'm in the Indianapolis area and just started scoping places out and visited Louisville, and it was in a great spot in the city, pretty newly renovated. And the staff members that I talked with were just really, really easy to work with, really friendly, which just as a whole, since I'm kind of relying on a lot of different partners, since I don't have the structural resources to just do it, I mean, you kind of look for aspects like that from the people that you want to work with. And yeah, just landed on Louisville. Yeah.
And so when you talk about putting on this show, one of the things is the brands that build all this stuff, they're shipping in, like we said, thousands of pounds of equipment. How do you work with the logistics of all that? Is it the brand's responsibility? Is that something that the convention center facilitates? Do you have somebody that does it specifically?
Yeah, that's who I work with. As I mentioned earlier, the decorator. They handle all of that stuff. I mean, it's my job to communicate that to them, but basically, there's a number of different ways that you can unload your stuff. You can bring it yourself. You can ship it to an advanced warehouse where they store it like up until like the last 60, 90 days and then bring it and put it to your booth, or you can deliver on site. So there's just a number of different ways to do that. I mean, we're just following industry standards when it comes to stuff like that.
And when you say you're following industry standards, obviously you had to learn those the hard way a couple of times, right?
Yeah. So like the gym equipment space is just a different beast than a lot of the other conferences. You're not just shipping tables and some small items. Like some companies are literally shipping 20,000 pounds worth of stuff because you have dumbbells, weight plates, really large strength machines. So it's also a
And they're
really
shipping from other countries.
And also shipping from other countries, company people have to get visas just to travel. So you have to work with them to help them get their visas. Um, yeah, just a number of different things. And then you got the unload, unload. And yeah, that I think as far as logistics goes, we've gotten better each year. But predicting with in addition to like it growing each year, you just don't know exactly what to expect. So it takes a flexible group of people that you want to work with, and getting volunteers to help as well definitely cuts some time too. So part of it is just trying to make sure everyone has a good attitude, like going into the weekend, because there's just going to be hurdles each year when it comes to that stuff. I think from my experience of talking with other people that do trade shows, like it's just normal. It's just normal. You're bringing in a ton of stuff through garage doors. You might have to haul it like a football field away, and it's just part of the process. It's part of the investment into the event. It's also going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, like moving sandbags all the way across the convention center floor.
Yep, fun.
Wouldn't know anything about that one. So, so when you talked about how you've been growing, can you give the audience some numbers of how you've grown year over year?
Yeah, as far as like, I think booth space filled is the easiest way to describe that. So the first year, I think we had about 5,000 square feet of booth space filled among the 29, 30 companies. Second year, I mentioned we maxed out the space. We had about, I think it was about 16,900 square feet of vendor space filled. Last year, as we moved to Louisville, more space, it was about 37,000 square feet. And then going into this year with 4 months out, we filled about 52,000 square feet.
And how much space do you have available, like total wise, to think of percentages of sold space essentially?
I think it's about 80% full if I had to do it off the top of my head. So we have about 52,000 square feet of vendor booth space. We also have hallways that you have to kind of account
Yep.
for, and then also competitions. So the overall building, the space is 204,000 square feet, and it's going to be pretty full.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of trying to give the audience a little bit of perspective on is just the booth space is like if you took every single booth, put them side by side in a giant cube, but that's not the whole showroom floor.
Right, right. Yeah, the whole 200,000 square foot should be pretty much full this year.
And that's up from last year, correct?
Yes. So when you are renting out these spaces, they're usually like a bunch of halls connected, and you can rent one, two, three, four, or all five. And some convention centers have a lot of different halls. So last year we had 4 out of the 5 halls rented, but one of the ones that we didn't have was the largest one. So we had like an L shape last year, if you remember. And then this year we kind of have a full rectangle. So it should be a lot smoother of a floor plan. And it's also one thing you don't really think about until you actually see it in person, and you're like, oh, this L isn't necessarily ideal. And there were some companies that probably just didn't get as much traffic as others did, just because of the shape that we rented.
Yeah, and it looked fine on paper until you actually walked it for the first time the day
Yeah,
before the
it
show
was
started.
overall it was okay, but it could have been improved, and we're improving it this year.
And when you talk about, as you're trying to scale it, what are you looking for like what would you consider success metrics for the show?
Yeah, I mean, very, very obvious is ticket sales. So we have like, the way I think about it is we have to have enough people to make the vendors happy. I think you have to get the vendors first, and then the people see who's coming, and then they'll come.
Mhm.
You want to kind of prove that out that first. Um, and then some other metrics that are important is just like return rate. The amount of vendors returning year after year after year. Um, if I had to guess off the top of my head, I think about 85% of the floor is back from last year, which is pretty positive. And then also one thing that has really caught my interest as well, and I see it as an important piece, not only companies improving their booths year after year after year, which we're definitely seeing, but they're coming back with more space. So I mentioned we had 37,000 square feet filled last year. We had about 120 companies there, but we have only 125 ish companies signed up right now, but quite a bit more booth space filled. So a lot of the companies are coming back with more space, which tells me that they see it as a really strong opportunity to, connect with the audience, build a brand, et cetera. And they're just getting a lot out of the event, and they see more potential.
And when you're talking about a trade show, it's I noticed this because I was there, but it's a balance between showing your newest products and also getting feedback from the customers on on what you're developing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different reasons companies show up. Um, and it really comes down to, what's your ultimate goal? Do you want to bring products that are not quite ready for the market and you want to get feedback? Do you want to bring just items to sell and make an ROI day of? Or do you want to, build this beautiful booth and it's more focused on like improving your brand or showing your brand to the community, which can ultimately help in the long run? So there's just a number of different like goals that you may have for the show. And I would say in general, it's relatively spread out among some of those things that I mentioned.
Yeah, and one thing I know occurred is some brands showed up just for social media influencers that were there.
Yeah, that's another big thing. That's another marketing opportunity that this shows provide. We want to really make it kind of like a can't miss experience for anybody who creates content. You have all the brands underneath one roof, not only for you to create content at the show, but to help form connections for the next years. So it's just much easier to do this in person, and find the right companies after you had a in-person conversation. Company can feel you out to see if you're the right fit, and so on. So that's another. There's probably 10 different ROI, different measures that we can add, and then just creator experience or creator or just social media in general is definitely one of those that's at the top.
And I'll say it too. That's how I met you. And I've gotten a few other guests is by showing up there and talking to people,
Yeah, yeah.
and we
It's much easier to send somebody a follow-up email and communicate after you've met them in person.
absolutely, because there have already been a few guests on the show that I've released that I met through just being there and talking to them and explaining this is what the show's about. And they were glad the CEOs were glad to oblige because they didn't have to talk about specifics of their equipment.
Yeah, yeah, something a little different.
Yeah, they met somebody that wanted to talk more business.
Yeah.
So, as you're developing the show, as you're improving the show and iterating it, what does your runway look like for planning for the following year?
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's a different interesting timeline. I think the most important times are the following 30 days after the event, and then maybe the last 120 days, which is like kind of where we're at now. In between is kind of like a dead time, not dead time, still quietly working, but you want the most can be accomplished when people are thinking about it. So fresh after the event, it's like, all right, let's get everything in place for the prior year's event so we can get ticket sales up and running and vendor signups ready. So the goal within the first 30 days, and that also in that initial outreach and planning, you have to take some of the lessons you learned while you were there and immediately apply them into planning for next year. Um, so the biggest vendor sign up time is basically immediately. So that's that so if so for example, if I can get 60, 70, 80 companies signed up right away, then it becomes much easier, kind of like I was talking about earlier, to go out and get some other companies that maybe haven't signed up yet in years prior. So that's key. And then we also, like, once usually you get those initial signups, same with tickets, you get more tickets who immediately sign up. It's like, the diehards, the ones that love the event and want to support it. They're the ones who typically buy their tickets right away as well. So that just kind of helps get the ball rolling on to next year. And then as far as like the next year goes, it's like slow but steadily marketing it. So I do that slowly but surely through the blog, the podcast, the newsletter, social media. I also start like sales emails and work on some sort of timeline for the sales emails beginning around that time. And if the timing is still kind of similar year after year, there's another really big sales emphasis right before companies start doing their fiscal year planning. So usually, from what I can tell, a lot of the larger companies, they kind of determine their budget around November, maybe October, maybe December, but getting on their radar before that planning process starts is also key. And then is when it picks back up again. So one thing that I've learned with vendor communication is if you start sending emails out too early, like 7, 6, 7, 8 months out from the event, it's more likely just to go over their head. So now, and like the past month is really when we've tried to nail down all of the logistics and those sorts of things. And then from here on out, there's still like hundreds of companies who you still want to get there. So if we can get 20 to 30 more added to the vendor list right now, that would be amazing. But yeah, there's just a lot of different logistics. You got to work with the hotel. You have to work with the content creators. You want to get the competition set. So it's kind of like a slow burn throughout the year of trying to get all of those things nailed down.
Yeah, that's something that you haven't even brought up was all the competitions that you have in addition to the trade show and, sanctioning those events and all that, organizing them, all that stuff, because you're not in charge of specifically all of that, are you?
No, I don't charge for competition space or anything like that. One thing that I have been able to do this year is kind of get some like team lead roles. So we've got Kurt who runs the strongman competition. He's done a really good job the last 2 years, and he's kind of been, I don't want to say promoted, but he's kind of like I guess you could say he's promoted to like the competition lead. I have Matt Pendergraph running our social media. And then, yeah, and I've got a buddy, Sean, who runs the website. So I'm starting to build out a team with some smaller roles that, as this event grows, hopefully can lead to some additional opportunities.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to pause to mention that that I have a Patreon for the show. Every guest participates in the postmortem interviews, which is a bonus conversation only available for Patreon subscribers. And Jake is going to be talking about how he collects data, understands the trend analysis methods, and some of the importance of building an audience, and specifically a niche audience, because I'd argue that he's probably one of the better people you want to listen to on that, because he built a trade show out of a very niche audience to start with.
Yeah, I do have some experience building a niche audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, talking about how I've collected data and ultimately, basically, this is kind of a bonus, ultimately giving, from what I think, free advice to all of these potential vendors is
Well, we
one
don't want to
reason that followed and ultimately did do.
I was going to say,
a
we
good
don't want to
job.
give away too much for free here.
Sorry about that. We can go into that later.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's your teaser. So when you're talking about running the show and building the show, how did you kind of do all the planning for it? Did you just kind of grab an Excel document, or how did you do all this? Because it doesn't sound like it sounds like it's something that somebody like me as a PM would be doing, not using a lot of my skill set. And
Yeah, I think in general, specifically with a startup, you just have to do some certain things that might not get by a finance team, for example. There's just certain risks that go into all this, like the upfront payment for the booth for the convention center is not like a fun thing to do. It's like you're taking a risk each year, like, okay, hopefully people sign up. But that being said, luckily I worked in marketing analytics. I wasn't necessarily a project manager, but I worked with project managers. So I was pretty familiar with timelines and working on Google Docs and working on Google Sheets. I primarily just use Google Sheets as far as like numbers stuff, easy to share, easy to update, easy to correct. And then a lot of it is just like gut, just going with your gut. When does it feel right to start sending another sales campaign? I definitely do, like at the beginning of the year, kind of like, I don't write down specific dates, but I write down and also have it in my head to just promote different messages throughout the year, specifically within those sales emails. But it is a long year, especially when like I said, there's new challenges each year. So you just have to be on your be on your toes. But yeah, like Google Sheets, Canva is a game changer for me. I kind of have like I wouldn't say I'm an expert in anything, just have kind of a lot of broad skills. But yeah, modern tools make it definitely possible for anybody to do something like this.
yeah, for the audience, I wasn't trying to talk down to Jake or demean him or any way, shape, or form. It's just we always talk as PMs that we have a specific set of skills, and that's
No,
what we do.
I'm not. I don't have those skills. I'm not very detail oriented. Would say I'm kind of your typical entrepreneur when it comes to just like going for it and not necessarily having a plan all the time. And, even you just like scheduling this podcast with me, I was not probably the easiest to get that done. So, so yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think like it will be important for me as this continues to grow to find the right people around me to help manage that.
Well, I know a good PM.
Noted.
So when you're talking about some of this stuff, like, we talked about the load in, and that's literally how many vendors did you say you had? Over 120, bringing in anywhere from 1,000 pounds to a 20,000 pound container and everything in between. How do you stagger that out, or how do you make it so that everything flows, we'll say, as efficiently as it could be in chaos?
Yeah, that's a lot of that is, again, it goes into people just buying into the event as a whole. But if the event wasn't what it is today, and I think somebody knew it was going to take 10 hours to load stuff in, they'd be like, it's not worth it. So part of it is just making it such a good event that you can't ignore it. Uh, but as far as load in, we want to make it as streamlined of a process as possible. And I keep mentioning this, but I found a really great partner that first year that has been very, very flexible with all of the load ends. It's never going to be 100% seamless, but we're learning year after year, making it better. Luckily, relatively organically, I would say people like there are certain times that are busier than others, but unless you're waiting until the last minute, people just show up at different times. So we have 2.5 days to, load in your stuff. And Luckily, just kind of flows because the biggest companies need to get in there right away. So usually they're all already in. And when we usually have backlogs, it's usually, let's just say the event starts Friday. It's usually Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. That's really when the backlog happens. And it's probably not something that's ever going to be solved 100%. But if we can get more volunteers bringing stuff in, I think we've definitely noticed who companies who have done it 1 year before make small changes, which makes it easier to load in. We do, like, if you've ever done a trade show at a large convention center, maybe at like a union operated facility, it is so expensive to bring your stuff in. Luckily, the Mike is the guy that we work with. Luckily, he charges $25 per pallet if he helps to take it from the back to your booth, which is, if more people would just buy into that, that would save everybody a lot of time and probably more cost effective. So a lot of it is just everybody growing together, if that makes sense. Like a lot of these companies, the first few years, it was their very first trade show. So that's been another hard selling point to a lot of these companies. It's like a lot of these companies have never been to a show. They don't understand all of the benefits. And I know I'm going off tangent a little bit, but that's another thing that's been difficult to get through to a lot of people, that it just makes sense to be there, but for whatever reason, they're still not there.
Yeah, and I mean these are all great points that people don't think about when we go to these trade shows, because I've been to plenty of them aside from, for work stuff. And you go to the events and you walk around and you see all these booths and stuff, and you're just like, that's really cool. But forget that it takes a lot of money to make that happen.
It takes a lot of money, and the ones that get the most out of it are the ones that start preparing months in advance. So again, it goes part of it just goes back to getting it large enough, getting enough people so that people take it really seriously.
And one of the things that you highlighted to me when you filled out the form about coming on the show is you highlighted more risk, more reward. Care to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, yeah. I think that goes back to kind of veering off the traditional path of where I started. I think for anybody who, wants to create something unique, there's always going to be some sort of risk. And I think a lot of people aren't necessarily willing to take that risk. They're just kind of okay with where they're at. But if to take you back to like before this event started, I had a social media account that was around 200, a blog, 5,000 subscribers, podcast that was, I don't even know the numbers, but it was small. Podcast, another newsletter with 6,000 subscribers, and there was a ceiling to that. Um, Definitely a ceiling to that, especially like just knowing yourself. There's certain skills that I don't think I'll ever have, like garage gym reviews, for example. Like he just has a knack for it. I think he loved doing that stuff so much that, like, the sky is the ceiling for somebody like that. And there's definitely others in that space with that sort of skill, that personality. And I don't necessarily had that, but I did know, like, once you build an audience, you have some attention, you've built some trust. There's a number of different businesses that could be created outside of just like this media landscape, or the media type of business, which within a niche setting can be difficult, very difficult. So I just think, like, when it all comes down to it, if you find an opportunity or if you have an idea, like, sure, there's definitely some risk, but the reward might ultimately be way higher than what it is going into it. And like, there's still, like, even into year 4, I still feel like a ton of risk. Like, I've kind of bet everything year after year after year after year. And, people might think, oh, wow, they're just killing it. It looks great, but it's not necessarily pretty on the other end when it comes to finances and stuff like that. But ultimately, if this keeps going the way it is, that risk might ultimately pay off.
Yeah, you're killing it. You're killing yourself.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. I mean, and this is something that I think that's important to talk about with somebody who's living it, because we see, especially with like social media now, everybody talks about everything that's great, but we don't focus on how hard it is on the other side of that greatness on social media that you're not talking about, because you've still got to maintain that veneer of success, so to speak.
Yeah, and I just don't think everyone wants to hear your sob story.
Well, not while you're trying to sell on something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like every great business had struggles that you just had to get through. And there was always some risk with that.
Yeah, if there was no risk, then I'd be asking a lot of questions about where you're looking at things.
Yeah.
So now is the time where we get to my personalized question for the guest. He needs to take a drink before he gets this.
Yeah.
So when you think about, we'll go with the theme of what you're building, but when you think about the future, where do you see your definition of success being in terms of whatever it may be?
What does success look like? I think there's when you start something like this, you see where it could go. And then as time goes along, you get so deep in the weeds that you stop looking ahead and you just try and like get through whatever you're getting through. But as the event does keep growing, and it really is having a substantial impact on the industry, I think. And it's sort of something that you almost just can't miss if you are in this space. I think what success looks like for me is its impact on the industry as a whole. So, like, when it all comes down to why I started in this space in the first place, it comes down to a home gym was helping my life, my busy life. I was going to the gym. I went to the gym for many years before, 5 a.m. was going to the gym, then going to work. And the home gym ultimately saved me massive amounts of time. And
Oh, yeah.
I know, um, I worked within the space, but if it wasn't for the time saved by owning a home gym, none of this would have ever been possible. Like whatever you're doing when it comes to owning a home gym, you can ultimately save time, which gives you more time to do whatever you want. Whether it's spend time with your family, whether it's start that side hustle. I just like truly believe in the home gym for most people. And I think the biggest opportunity is just to get more home gym owners, which will ultimately make society better. I truly believe that. So that's I don't know exactly, I don't have like a strict answer for you, but I want to see it impact the home gym community, whether it be like more home gym owners. I think there's a flywheel that goes with it. There's more home gym owners. With more home gym owners, there's more investment to home gym products. Products get better. More people see these awesome products. Maybe the prices come down, products get better, and ultimately more people have a home gym and ultimately live more fulfilling, healthier lives. I think really that's what it comes down to.
I mean, it didn't have to, I, I asked that question because I wanted it to be, what does it mean to you? Not necessarily a metric, a number. It's a question just for you to kind of reflect on just as much as it was for the audience.
Yeah, I think if you want me personally, I would say I want it to be a culturally relevant event. I think I want it to impact more than just this community. I see like events like Mr. Olympia, who just had its 50th year. I would want Home Gym Con to be a staple for the next 100 years.
Well, let's hope at that point you've passed off a lot of the work and you can just sit back and relax.
Yeah, I just I want it to be a force, and I want it to be something that drives impact for every single year.
Wow. I mean, that's an impressive goal. And not many people can say they've impacted that many people's lives like that. So now is the time when I'm going to hand the floor over to you, let the audience know where they can find you, everything that's going on with you and what you got with Home Gym Con and all that stuff.
Cool. Yeah. You can check out Home Gym Con at homegymcon.com. You can follow Home Gym Con on Instagram. I also run Garage Gym Experiment on Instagram. And I run a home gym podcast for anybody who's a home gym nerd. I imagine if you're a home gym nerd listening to this, you already know about those channels. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
And I'll have show links or links to all those stuff in the show notes. I want to thank, most importantly, the Patreon subscribers who help fund the show and keep it going. Don't forget, and I want to also thank the listeners for coming in every week and tuning in. And most importantly, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe on all the platforms. It's the best deal in town. It's free. Does cost you nothing, but it helps out the creators immensely. You know, that's how Jake built what he built, is just through grassroots, and kind of what I'm doing too. And I'll end like I always do. You know, your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Jake Jaworski, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the disgruntled PM. Thanks for listening.